Hey, what's up, super friends? Jake here from the Brave and the Boys, and today we are doing a video that I'm very excited to do. We are doing top 10 Alan Moore reads. Now, Alan Moore is a lot of things. He's a prolific comic book writer, he's an actual wizard, and he is someone who has tremendously transformed the comic book landscape. Now, I haven't read everything Alan Moore has written because his books are textured and layered and dense. Like, it's crazy. I read like 16 Ed Brubaker books in the time it took me to read one Alan Moore book. So, yes, I haven't read everything, but of the books I've read, these are my 10 favorite. Before we get started, I want to say thank you so much to Organic Price Books. They helped make videos like this possible. There, you can save $2 with the code BRAVEBOYS, or if you're buying 4 or more, you can save 5% with the code BRAVEBOYSsit. Before we get started, I want to remind you all to smash that like button, click subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. Jordan and I put a lot of work into this channel, and the response we've gotten from all of you is amazing, and we want to keep the good times rolling. So go ahead and join our community. We got a Discord, and we just want to talk comics. Like, we do a book club. Our next book we're going to do is Hellboy, so join the book club. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this video is because we have pissed off a lot of Alan Moore fans, and if Alan Moore ever watched our videos, we probably pissed him off too. So in order to dispel all the bad juju, I wanted to make a video talking about 10 awesome Alan Moore books that were written by him that you should read. So let's dive in.
Deep within a bleak and dismal swamp, hidden beneath its murky waters, lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time, the Legion of Doom.
Coming in at number 10, we have The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Brian Boland. This came out in 1988 and was loosely based off of the 1951 story, The Man Behind the Red Hood, created by the true creator of Batman, Bill Finger. Now, here's the thing. I don't think The Killing Joke has aged super well. Alan Moore definitely doesn't think The Killing Age has aged super well, but it is still a phenomenal story. What it created and how it became an out-of-continuity story that profoundly transformed DC continuity is truly amazing. It offered a hypothetical, maybe origin story for the Clown Prince of Crime without giving you definitive answers, and the Joker is crazy in this. It gives you sympathy for the Joker, it gives you terror for the Joker, it gives you fear for the Joker, and it is just like a crazy story. But at the core, it is the Joker trying to test his theory that anyone is just one bad day away from becoming a supervillain. Now, what I love about this story is the Joker doesn't get the answer that he wants. So even though he profoundly destroys, even though he profoundly hurts and impacts the Gordon family and Batman, they don't give in. And the ending is left open and ambiguous. It's really worth reading. What's cool about the Absolute Edition is you're going to get both colorings that they did, and it's a really cool way to read this story. That being said, other books on this list have aged a lot better. So you guys know I love giving you other books that you could read after this one, or movies that you could read after. There's a whole box set of Batman One Bad Days, and there's an animated movie, but this is an Alan Moore video, so we're not going to do that. I didn't tell you to read those. Just read The Killing Joke, or better yet, don't read The Killing Joke, because Alan Moore doesn't want you to read it. Moving on to number 9. Coming in at number 9 is a book you definitely should read, and actually has aged surprisingly well. That is Saga of the Swamp Thing by Alan Moore and various artists, which will be listed down below. So, Saga of the Swamp Thing, what is it? What's the story behind it? So, DC decided to cancel the original Swamp Thing run, and at the last second, Alan Moore came in as the writer. They gave him free reign to do whatever he wanted, and he profoundly transformed not just the character of Swamp Thing, but his entire mythos, his entire story, and DC Comics as a whole. So, I love Swamp Thing. You can read this in the awesome box set, which has the original classic colors and kind of gives it a cool classic monster vibe. You can read it in the Absolutes, which are gorgeous, oversized, but they do have recolored art. For me, this was the first way I read it, so I didn't have a problem with the art. So when Alan Moore took over the series, he threw out the original cast of supporting characters and completely transformed the mythos of the Swamp Thing character. This came to fruition in issue 21, the anatomy lesson, where the Floronic Man does an autopsy on Swamp Thing's body, and it answers the question of, is he a human or is he a monster? And he is a monster. He's a plant that thinks he's a human. That is crazy. And he really dives deep in his relationship with Abby Arcane. There's amazing stories. One of my favorite stories was based off of Dante's Inferno, where he has to go to hell to rescue Abby, and along the way, you meet like the Phantom Stranger and all these crazy characters, and it is just a wild ride. It is scary at times and adventurous at others. It waxes poetically on what is life and what it means to be alive. There's amazing scenes where Abby and Swamp Thing have romantic moments through a hallucination or through eating a fruit that makes him look like a sexy man. A lot of craziness. Loved all of it. You know, it went a little too far when a certain alien planet monster thing had its way with Swamp Thing and made little babies, but you know what? That's Alan Moore for you. He always takes things a little bit too far. Now, if you want to read other stuff, there is a fourth absolute, which is the Lin Wein stuff that takes place beforehand. But this is a phenomenal Swamp Thing run that you should definitely check out. Now let's move on to number 8. Coming in at number 8 is a book that I had never heard of before I read it. This is Miacleman by Alan Moore. It does say by untitled author on the book, because this is another thing where he's chosen to have his name removed from the work. And I think it's a shame, because if you like Watchmen, you're going to love Miacleman. So I'm a little fuzzy on the history. I don't want to say something wrong, but I'm going to try to do my best. And if I'm wrong, which I'll definitely be, let me know in the comments down below. Captain Marvel comics were super popular, and some of them were copied and done in black and white over in England, and through rights issues, they had to rewrite the character. And I think at one point Shazam or Captain Marvel was even more popular than Superman. So, and Alan Moore loved these comics growing up as a kid. And when he got older, he did everything he could to be the writer of the reboot of Miacleman, and he wanted to do things you couldn't normally do in a superhero comic. He wanted to turn it up to an adult level, and he definitely does that. So Michael Moran tells the story of like a 40-year-old man named Michael Moran who used to imagine or dream of being a superhero, but he's really not one. And he's at the bank one day, and a bank robbery happens, and suddenly he remembers, oh my God, when he was a kid, he could say the magic word. I think it was Komodo, and he would transform into basically Shazam or Captain Marvel. And along the way, you get into the depths of what it means to be a hero. Like, this is not some happy-go-lucky Shazam comic. There are themes in this book that are dark, that are heavy. This is like the same thing with Watchmen, where he puts the lens onto what superhuman beings would really do in the world, and they profoundly transform the characters and civilization as we know it. It's an incredible storyline. It was actually the first Marvel Omnibus I bought before I got into Marvel Comics. That's how badly I wanted to read this, and I just tore through it. I read it in a day. It's amazing. Even though it does tackle on some really dark themes, it is done. There's a side of humanity inside of Michael Moran that I think makes the book definitely worth checking out. And if you read it, it's a great companion piece to later books that he did down the line. And it's just an awesome critique on superheroes in general. Now let's move on to number 7. Coming in at number 7, we had a movie I had always wanted to watch, V for Vendetta, but I always told myself I'd have to read the comic first, and I never got around to it. And then our sponsors, Organic Price Books, sent me this Absolute because they know I'm an Absolute junkie, and I got to read V for Vendetta for the first time in the Absolute format. V for Vendetta originally came out in black and white, done by Alan Moore and art by David Lloyd, and then was subsequently reprinted as a 10-issue graphic novel by DC in color. And you guys know I love my books in color. V for Vendetta is an amazing story. What I've said, my one critique isn't of the story, because I think the story is raw and emotional and powerful, and it's a look at how we deal with the boot of tyranny. But I think there is context that I'll never truly understand. I think there's a little bit of you had to live under Margaret Thatcher's Iron Rule to get all of the full context, because this is a huge critique of that. But I love the relationship between the vigilante V and Evie, his protege in training, and you slowly get to see him systematically take out the government and take out tyranny, and along the way you never know V's true intentions or motives, and when you get to learn about his past and what he's been through, it is a crazy story. Little British, a lot British, little too British for me. Like, sometimes I was having trouble reading what they were saying because the accents were so thick, and I'd never experienced that before. But it's a phenomenal story. If you want to check out the art, how it's meant to be seen, you got to get the Absolute Edition and grab it from Organic Price Books. Save $2 with the code Braveboys. But V for Vendetta is awesome. And you know what? I've never even seen the movie. I love me some Natalie Portman, but this book was so good, I had no desire to see a movie of it. But yeah, V for Vendetta, you got to check it out. Now let's move on to one of my favorites, number 6. Coming in at number 6, we have the only Superman title on this list, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and specifically for the Man Who Has Everything. So I want to say I love this book. I've talked before about how I love it. If you want to see my list of top 10 Superman books, you can watch that here. And I do want to say congratulations to our winner of the trade paperback of this book. This is Alan Moore's imaginary story to the swan song end of the Silver Age Superman. Now, I read this before I had read any of the Silver Age Superman, and I still loved it. It's a crazy story where Superman goes too far and faces the consequences and then has to make a decision that only he would do. You get to see him battle all of his classic rogues, and it is a phenomenal story. Now, I'm currently trying to get through the first Silver Age Superman Omnibus, and it gave me new context to how wacky and kooky and zany this book is. And when I reread this again before this video, I had even more context and love for that storyline. Then they take it even further with what I think is a better story, Superman for the Man Who Has Everything. This is a heartbreaking and tragic story that they adapted in the Justice League TV show that Alan Moore actually likes. He has an adaptation that he put his stamp of approval on. In this, Mongol puts an alien flower on Superman, and it slowly absorbs and eats him away, as gives him everything he's ever desired and ever wished for. And you get to see a life of what if Krypton had never exploded? What if he got to raise a Kryptonese family? And he has to make the ultimate sacrifice, and it is a heartbreaking story that shows what's truly important to the Man of Steel. For all these reasons and more, you get 2 amazing, awesome stories in this book. You gotta go for the deluxe edition. Unless you're the winner of our trade paperback, then that's the best way to read it. Congratulations. But okay, now where things are heating up, let's go to number 5. What's crazy about the top 5 on this list is any one of these books can be considered Moore's magnum opus. From Hell is dark and full of the occult and terrible themes that I normally can't get behind in comics. But oh my god, the research Alan Moore did for this book is insane. This was like reading a textbook of information of the Freemasons and Victorian culture and the Whitechapel Jack the Ripper murders. And it is insane how powerful the story is in this book. It's also dense, super hard to get through. I made the mistake of trying to read it on the plane, and like every scene was sex or prostitutes getting murdered, and it was just not the book you want to read on the plane. But if you're home and the doors are locked and the blinds are drawn and nobody's around, then you can crack open From Hell. So when I first bought From Hell, when I was making this video, I decided to cheap out a little bit, and I bought their regular paperback edition, and I crack it open, and it's in black and white, and this book is already hard enough to get through. So you know what I did? I returned it to Amazon. I spent $15 more, and I got the Master Edition. Is that what it is? Master Edition? And it's hardback, which I love. Love me a hardback book, and it's in color. This was a serial book, and it came out between 1989 all the way up to 1998. It is written by Alan Moore and art by Ed Campbell. And it is crazy. Like I said, this was a hard book for me to get through. Like, I almost needed to pull out Silver Age Superman in between because I needed some brevity and some lightness because of how dark this book is. But it tells the story of how the Victorian monarch maybe had a hand, along with the Freemasons and the occult, in the Jack the Ripper killings. And it is dark, and you should definitely read it, but know what you're getting into. I wouldn't recommend this book to anybody. You know, it might not even be for me, but it was that good and that well researched that I was able to enjoy it slowly and let it digest and let it sit with me and then read a bit more. This is not a book I binged, and probably not a book that I'll read again for a long time, but it is a book that I am so happy I read. Moving on to something more positive, number 4. Coming in at number 4 is the first of the ABC, America's Best Comics, books that you'll see on this list. America's Best Comics was an imprint of Wildstorm, which became an imprint of DC. So what do you know? Moore's back at DC, sure he was not thrilled about that. So one of the things you got to know about the ABC Comics is there's no superheroes. There's science heroes. Top 10 tells the story of all of the science heroes being moved to one community known as Neopolis, and it is like a gritty police drama to its very core. So the story starts off with Toybox, the young recruit, getting partnered with Smacks, who's like the grizzled old cop that doesn't want a young partner. And there's several different crimes that they have to investigate. It's like a TV show, but then all the crimes start to converge. And all of that on its own would make it a phenomenal comic. Just like a gritty police drama set in a world where everybody's a superhero. I mean, like, it is crazy. Like, it's everything from a guy who cooks hot dogs with his laser vision to someone who can run super fast delivering the mail. You know, it's like they're all science heroes, so none of them are science heroes. But what makes this book so special is the art. The art is done by Gene Ha and Xander Cannon, which, by the way, sounds like a badass superhero. But it's the visual gags. Like, one moment when I found out how special this book was one of the characters, Dust Devil. His mom calls and she says, "Hey, there's a hole in the wall." And he's like, "What, a hole?" So he goes to her apartment, and what do you know? There's Ultra Mice invading her apartment. And what do? They have to get the Ex-Verminator to bring Atomic Cats to get, because that's the only way you can get rid of Ultra Mice is Atomic Cats. And I thought, okay, that's kind of funny. That's it. We're done with this portion. Cut to a few days later, and what do you know? It's evolved into a crisis level event where there's like Galactus and Eternity, and it's like one of them is Mickey Mouse. I'll put up an art from that book right there. It's just so silly and so bonkers and so bizarre. And there are just moments in this book, profound moments with quotes about life and philosophy that just profoundly affected me. The Absolute also covers some of the spin-offs, the next one being Smacks, which transforms the gritty city to a fantasy novel. It was like reading The Hobbit, but with Alan Moore's thoughts and humor. And then there was a prequel, the 1949ers, and it's an amazing book. There is a compendium that's in print right now that I think collects stuff that Alan Moore didn't do in addition to all the Alan Moore stuff. But Top 10 is a book that everybody needs to read. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal story. These lists are always so hard to do. These last three are three of the best comics I've ever read in my life. And you could almost put them in any order, but I worked hard to make my list. So number 3, we have Promethea. Now, I first read Promethea in a set of the deluxes, which were gorgeous and beautiful. I did give those to Jordan, but I was able to slowly work my way through upgrading to the Absolute editions, because here's the thing. If I was voting on what Alan Moore book has the best art, honestly, if I was to vote what comic book has the best art, Promethea would be my number one. So Promethea was written by Alan Moore with art by J.H. Williams III. It was another one in the ABC comic imprint, and it is crazy. So if you read the first volume, it's interesting. I like to say the first volume is Sandman meets Wonder Woman, and it is like an adventure comic, and there's some mysticism. But book 2 and 3, Alan Moore took it up a notch. These are basically visual art textbooks for every belief about magic and the occult and mysticism and what happens after you die and how to transform the world and achieve higher levels of human consciousness. It's bonkers. It tells the story of Sophie Bangs, a college student who's writing a book on a character who's popped up in comic books and movies and war propagandas named Promethea. And what she finds out is she is destined to become the next Promethea, protector of the Immateria. And it is a wild story. In the second volume, she decides to go into the afterlife with one of the previous Prometheas, and Alan Moore basically tackles complex themes about the Cabal and magic hierarchy, and it is absolutely wild because this is all backed up by the greatest art I have ever seen. Double page spreads, infinity spreads, just crazy bonker stuff. And then in volume 3, you have the end of the world and the end of the ABC comics, and it does cross over a little bit with Tom Strong, so there is a specific order. You probably want to start with Promethea, then read all of Tom Strong except for the last issue, then finish Promethea, then read Tom Strong. I think that's probably the best way to read it. But yeah, Promethea is wild. I felt like a wiser person after being done reading it. I felt like I understood I got a glimpse into the secrets of the universe. And I can't say that about many other comics. Let's move on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 is Tom Strong, written by Alan Moore with art by Cole Sprouse. And this is probably the height of the ABC comics. Tom Strong is a love letter to Doc Savage and the pulp heroes of old. It is the story of a science hero who grew up his early years in a gravity chamber, so he's super strong and can jump super high. And it's basically like Alan Moore writing about what if superheroes were fun? What if they were exciting? What if they were heroic? Tom Strong is a true hero with every meaning of the word. And he's got a family. It's like the Fantastic Four. It's so fun. He's got a wife named Delilah, and they're a amazing, loving couple. It was profound because it was one of the first interracial couples in comics, but it's also profound because it's a loving relationship that lasts the whole time. There's no Hank Pym moments that you have to worry about. They have a daughter named Tesla. They have a robot. They have a gorilla named King Solomon. It is just bonkers fun. He's got a little fan club, and he knows each of them by their number and their name, and he's just an amazing science hero. And it tells some one-off stories. It tells a couple multi-issue stuff. And what I love is that there'll be a one-off of the Modular Man or of the Aztec Empire aliens, and then sometimes they come back later, and it builds this whole world. You get to see him battle amazing villains, the best of them being Savan, who's kind of like his Joker, and it is awesome. The ending does cross over with Promethea. What I will say about this compendium is Alan Moore did step away for a little bit, and a couple other writers jump in to fill in the gaps. Jeff Johns, I don't think he got Tom Strong as much. I think he thought Tom Strong was Superman when Tom Strong is Doc Savage. The writer who did get it was Ed Brubaker. Ed Brubaker wrote a phenomenal story about Tom Strong. That was one of the best things in this book. And then Alan Moore came back for the ending and crushed it, completely reinventing the relationship between Tom Strong and Savine. And it is just a fun, heroic comic. I hope they reprint the deluxes and finish them this time. I hope we get an absolute. But you know what? I read the compendium and I loved every page. Now, if you haven't guessed what my number 1 is already, let's prove you right. Coming in at number 1 is Alan Moore's self-proclaimed favorite thing he's ever written, Doomsday Clock. Jeff Johns might not understand Tom Strong, but he does understand the intricacies of the 9-panel grid. Let's talk about... Okay. It wasn't that funny.
Okay, that was funny. I like that.
Our real number 1 is Watchmen. Now, I have to be honest... I wanted to put Tom Strong as my number 1, but I was too scared of the internet haters, so of course I put Watchmen. And Watchmen is his most important. Watchmen was written by Alan Moore with art by Dave Gibbons in the amazing 9-panel grid, and this is probably one of the most, if not the most important comic book ever written. We've talked about Watchmen a lot in ways that would make Alan Moore happy and ways that would definitely make Alan Moore mad. So for the purposes of this video, we are just talking about Watchmen and nothing else. Let's pretend like nothing else exists. There's just this, because this is my video trying to make Alan Moore lift that curse on me. So what is Watchmen? Watchmen is a hypothetical what if of new characters that were based on the recently acquired Charleston characters. So instead of the Question, you have Rorschach. Instead of Captain Atom, you have Dr. Manhattan. And it tells the story of a civilization on the brink of war and annihilation where only one human is superhuman. And it is a critique on superheroes. It's a critique on the Golden Age, the Silver Age, everything you can imagine. Everything is so layered. Jordan has the annotated Watchmen, and he'll constantly tell me a little tidbit where he's like, you know, they don't smoke cigarettes. The only one guy that does hand-rolled them, and everybody else smokes cigarettes in kooky ways. The world building on Watchmen is insane. The newspaper clippings, the TV shows, everything. And it's just like Top 10, where the world building makes the story better and elevates it. And at the core of it all is a murder mystery whodunit. And that's just such a good entryway into this world that Alan Moore crafted and created, and it is awesome. There's critiques on vigilantes, there's critiques on heroes, and there's just you just feel like you're slowly pulling away layers on the story every time you read it. I've read Watchmen probably over 10 times, and I pick out a new tidbit every single time. This year, Jordan and I are going to reread it with this collection, and we're going to read it once a month on the date that it came out. So we'll be sure to link those videos in the future. We're excited to do that. But yeah, Watchmen, I could go on and on about how amazing this is. I remember when I read it when I was about 12 years old, probably a little too young to read Watchmen, but I was engrossed. It was one of the best things. I still have my original trade paperback copy, and I love it to this day. Watchmen is amazing. Yeah, Alan Moore got screwed. I'm sorry, but we got one of the greatest graphic novels ever created. Maybe one of the best novels ever created. So guys, that's going to bring this video to a close. Thank you so much for watching. Let's jump into my final thoughts. And that's going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank you all for being the best brave boys and brave girls in the brave world. Go ahead and smash that like button, click subscribe, ring that bell for notifications so you can see the next video that Jordan and I cook up. And one last time, I want to say thank you to JP and David from Organic Price Books. If you want to pick up any of these books that are still in print, you can save $2 with the code BRAVEBOYS. Or if you're buying 4 or more, you can save 5% with the code BRAVEBOYSsit. Thank you all for being so amazing. We love you all. Keep reading and stay brave.